The first time your 2-year-old looks straight at you and says, "No, me do," it's a little shocking. But overwhelmingly, parents tell us that they want their kids to be independent. So today, we're going to be talking about raising 4th of July kids, building confident, independent learners. And you're going to want to stick around because at the end, I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do to survive the 4th of July fireworks with your sensitive child. This is LD Expert Live. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers, where we help children and adults permanently change their learning and attention challenges. Lauren Ma will be joining me today to do a little Q&A, so be sure and post your questions. And we'll be talking about what it takes for your children to be the independent learners that you want them to be. Lauren was instrumental in opening and building Stowell Learning Center in Irvine, California. She is incredibly knowledgeable and passionate about helping students reach their potential. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Yes, good morning. I see some people checking in already. This is exciting. I love to do Q&A with parents. And another part of my job I love, and we're going to be talking about helping kids to be independent, is that over the years, and I've been doing this now for 15 years, hard to say, is that we have seen I've seen hundreds and hundreds of kids go on to be confident, independent learners. So that's exciting. Jill and I are going to get very passionate about this, and we always love these shows because we can just go on forever about all this information. We're really passionate about it. So I wanted to bring in Maddie. So Maddie is, let's see, Maddie. Hi, Maddie.
Hi.
Maddie, an awesome clinician at our Irvine Center in Orange County, California. She's going to be helping to moderate today, taking your questions and comments. And actually, if you didn't know, because you only see me from the shoulders up on these broadcasts, I'm actually close to 9 months pregnant. And so I'll be going on maternity leave shortly. And Maddie will be taking over for me on LD Expert Live, taking comments and questions while I have that new baby. So welcome, Maddie.
Thanks for having me. But yeah, I'll be moderating the comments. So definitely say hi. I've already seen some comments come in saying hello. We've got someone checking in from Sacramento. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, leave your comments. If you're on Facebook, it'll be right below. And if you're on YouTube, it'll just be to the right. So this is an Ask Anything show. So we definitely want to hear your questions, and I'll be back to answer them later.
Well, this is LD Expert Live. Today, we are talking about building confident, independent learners. Lauren, you were a 2nd grade teacher in public school. When kids struggled and weren't able to be independent, what did that look like?
Well, when kids are not good at something, a lot of times when everybody is not good at something, a lot of times we deflect. We choose other behaviors that'll distract or take away or get us out of something that's uncomfortable. And kids are exactly the same. So when kids could not be independent, a lot of times they had behaviors that sometimes for teachers were kind of annoying. And a lot of teachers that maybe haven't done this kind of work just chalked it up to bad behavior, and it's really not. It's more avoidance. So I had kids that, I'd give an assignment, and slowly, you have a class of 30, and slowly the child would start to put the paper in their desk instead of work on it. Or as soon as I gave an assignment, the hand would go up, I need to go to the bathroom, and they'd be in the bathroom for 15 minutes. We had kids that like did things that they were better at, like chatting with their neighbors. They were social. They were the class clown. They would make everybody laugh. And so they were good at that. And that would a lot of times deflect from what they weren't good at. And so that's often what it looks like when kids are not comfortable or confident in what they're doing. It comes out in behaviors. And if you're a new teacher, if maybe you haven't had this experience working with underlying skills, you might think that it's just a behavior problem. We're actually not. Just like adults, if I'm not good at something, I'm going to try to avoid it for a while, but our kids don't have that option.
Right. Yes. Challenges in school, whether they're in the classroom or now parents are finding remotely at home, a lot of times they look like attention or behavior problems. And here's why. Having a learning or attention challenge is kind of like trying to do a job at the top of a ladder when some of the rungs underneath are unstable. So think about for a second, if you are at the top of a ladder and you're, say, changing a light bulb, but some of the rungs underneath are wobbly. Well, where is your attention and energy going to be focused? It's not going to be 100% on that task of changing the light bulb, right? It's going to be focused on not falling off the ladder. Well, you can place the skills needed for learning on a continuum that builds kind of like a ladder. So at school, kids are working up at the top of the continuum, learning reading, writing, spelling, math, and all those other subject areas. But there are whole sets of underlying skills that have to be in place in order to work efficiently at the top. So if you look at the bottom of the ladder, the green down there, those are core learning skills. Those are skills that allow us to be organized in our body, to have self-control, to move through space easily, to sit still, to manipulate a pencil, to move our eyes across the page for reading. These are skills that should be so automatic that we don't even have to think about them. They just happen. Now, as we move up a little bit, up to the blue there, we have processing skills, which is a little bit higher in the brain and a little higher on the continuum. These are skills like memory, various attention skills, how we perceive and think about information that we see and hear, how quickly we can comprehend and respond. And then moving up the next level, we have executive function, which is kind of like our personal manager. When any of these underlying skills are weak or inefficient, it diverts attention and it causes everything to be harder and take longer. So here's what you need to know. These skills can be developed. It's that strong foundation of underlying skills that is really the key to independence. So, Lauren, wouldn't you say that the behaviors that are so frustrating and worrisome to parents usually correlate with inefficient skills lower down on the continuum?
Absolutely. And it reminds me of an example. We had a student many years ago who fit this, kind of was a poster child for exactly what was going on lower level. And sometimes it doesn't even look like an academic problem or a school problem. We had a student, Evan, who came to us. He was fairly young and he was having behavioral problems. I mean, he was absolutely tearing his family apart. The entire family functioned kind of as a unit to get around Evan's behavior because he was so inflexible and he was like kind of like a loose cannon. Like he could go off at any moment and any little trigger could set him off. And so the family had actually changed their routines and their dynamics because they knew that Evan couldn't handle sudden changes, something unexpected. They knew they had to front load him before, there might have been, a situation that he couldn't be in control of. And parents had no idea that it could be related to underlying skills. They thought he was just like that. And soon at school, he started to get a reputation at school for kind of just being a loose cannon. And socially, it was starting to impact him. The kids knew that they either avoid him or purposely pick on him because they like to see him erupt. And actually, what was going on with Evan was happening at that core learning skills level, that green level. He actually had a number of retained reflexes that were constantly firing and getting in his way and putting him into an emotional reactive state, because that's what a reflex is. It makes you react without thinking. And as we worked with him and worked to integrate those retained reflexes down at that core learning level, his behavior changed. And it was amazing to see, because it's not like we were working on behavior. We weren't setting up rewards and consequences and anything like that. We were developing those underlying skills that for Evan were weak and were causing a disruption to his entire life, to his family's entire life. So definitely when I hear parents, tell me their stories about their kids, it often is centered around the frustrating behavior. And parents often don't know what to do and why it's happening.
Right. And I think it's either a behavior or attention. A lot of times when kids struggle, it comes across as attention challenges in the classroom. I remember a 4th grade student named Michael. He was dyslexic and he really struggled to read his schoolwork, but he was funny and social. So whenever it was time to do any kind of written work in class, he'd just start entertaining his classmates instead of doing his work. And then he would take all of his work home where his mom would help him. So to the teacher, it just looked like he had an attention problem. But the real issue had to do with auditory and visual processing of sounds and words.
And the thing, especially for teachers, for parents, kind of the school system in general, is that the school expects these skills to be automatic. And research has told us, they've done research studies that about 30% of the population, these skills aren't automatic. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be a disconnect. And so even when I was a teacher, in my classroom, kind of when I was taught best practices, they would say, teach, and when 70% of the class gets it, move on. Okay, well, that's going to happen almost every time. If you think 30% of the population is going to have some difficulty with these underlying skills and some difficulty with learning. So, but what if your kid is in that 30%?
Right.
Do you want the teacher just to move on? Probably not. So,
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's check in with Maddie and see who's joined us here.
Yeah, we've got quite a few people checking in to say hi. We have Karen in Sacramento. Hello, Karen.
We know Karen. She's in our mom squad. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Yeah.
All right. We got a neighbor. Hi from Orange County. Hello. How are you? We have Candace, who is from Fusion, Pasadena. So hi, Candace. So yeah, we've got a few people saying hi. One question that we've gotten is a parent was expressing that their teacher thinks that their daughter might have ADD. But when she sees her daughter, working on remote classes, it seems like she's engaged, but then kind of partway through, she'll start to end up like doodling and yawning and stuff like that. Any thoughts of what that might be?
It could be a lot of things. That is why part of our process is to do an assessment with every child, is because we don't want to guess. Okay. But something that's a red flag to me when I hear parents say that their child is struggling to listen, especially now with remote learning, with Zoom and they're on a screen and it's just harder to get a clear message. The audio is not as great as when you're in person. And the red flag is yawning. So if a child's struggling to listen and then starts yawning is kind of an autonomic nervous system response, an autonomic response to engage our system. And when there are auditory challenges, which I suspect might be going on here, the individual will start yawning as a way to kind of alert their system to pay attention and to get a clear message. And so that might be part of what's going on, is that the child is trying to engage and can't because of weak underlying auditory skills, and is trying to alert their system, but you can only do that for so long. So auditory processing, again, one of those kind of hidden underlying learning skills that sometimes nobody looks at, might be masking or looking like an attention problem in the classroom.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. And we see that, we see that so much for sure.
All the time. Yes.
All the time. But yeah, another parent expresses that, you know, their son is so smart and he loves when she reads to him, but he gets angry when he has to actually be the one reading. She knows he can do it, but he just doesn't want to. Any thoughts on that?
So think about, if we, and kids are exactly the same, but if we're good at something, we feel good about it. Okay. So it is not typical for a child to get angry about learning unless something is uncomfortable. And again, going back to those underlying skills, usually when kids have an aversion to reading and they get angry about it, that means that the process is probably uncomfortable. And I would suspect that there's something called visual disorientation happening. Visual disorientation is something we see in our dyslexic population, where it kind of looks like the words and the letters are moving, and that feels really disorienting. And if you've ever been disoriented, if you've ever been, I don't know, just had like a moment where like, whoa, what's happening? I mean, it's not a comfortable feeling. And if you're being asked to do that every single day, you're going to avoid it and eventually get angry. So that, again, not seeing the child and kind of just off the cuff, I would say that I would definitely want to look at visual disorientation as being a cause to some of that anger with reading.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And we've seen that for sure too. We do have a question. It's a little bit more specific to what we do. We have a mom in Maryland asking about our distance learning and kind of our process with that. And she's wondering like how much support and engagement from the parent is required for that. So any thoughts?
So our remote sessions have been awesome. I mean, truly, I can say that. I mean, I am biased, but you know, we hire wonderful people. Two, we are used to working with this population. So a little bit different than classroom learning. You know, we all had to go remote kind of in an instant as a country. And a lot of teachers, as wonderful as they were unprepared. There's nothing in the teacher credential program that kind of prepared us for this. But we are used to working with individuals that have learning challenges, which means being flexible and creative. So our remote sessions, I think, have been going really well, and kids have been getting the appropriate amount of training, are still able to work on those underlying skills. Now, we do require an assessment with every student, and we can do that remotely. We've been doing virtual screenings where we get a lot of really good information. We can see exactly where on the continuum kids are struggling, even remotely. And we design a customized program around that. So if we feel like a child is going to be successful with remote learning, we may recommend that we do 100% of it. If we feel like, hey, parent has been involved and it's something that can be a support, or child may need more direct support in the beginning, we may recommend that, yes, parent is part of that process. But it's not a one size fits all. It's not like it only can work if parent is sitting right next to the child and kind of guiding them. No, that we don't want to do that to parents. And that's not, I mean, those of you that have done remote learning for the past 3 months with school, if your child was not independent, that's probably how the last 3 months of your life felt. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. If I can see the rest of the question, if students start this process and discontinue and then resume again, what we're doing is brain training, skills training. So we're making permanent connections in the brain. New neural pathways is what the research tells us, the neuroplasticity. So when you train a skill long enough, if it's set, that skill is there. It's a permanent connection in the brain. So depending on where they are in their program, if a student does have to take a break and then picks back up again, no, not all of your training isn't necessarily lost. Just depending on where they are, you can resume. We don't recommend it. It's better to really, if you're going to create a new neural pathway in the brain, it's better to start, make that a solid permanent pathway in the brain, and then finish, and then it's a permanent skill. But there's a lot of different ways to do that, and that's why we customize a plan that's unique to every individual. Again, I want to say child, but we work with adults as well. So great question.
Yeah. Definitely. Yes, I can definitely testify to how custom everything we do is. Like nothing is the same for two kids ever.
No, it would be easy. Your job would be a lot easier if it was.
True. But yeah, definitely very customized for sure. Well, I will turn it back over to you guys. Everyone keep posting your comments and questions. I'll be checking back in a little bit to have them answered for you.
If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell. I'm speaking with Lauren Ma, the director of Stowell Learning Center in Irvine, California. Fabulous job answering questions, Lauren. Thank you. We are talking about building confident, independent learners. And all of you probably know some kids who are really, really good in school. And you might think, yeah, well, that's because they're so smart. Innate intelligence is certainly a factor in academic success, but having a high IQ doesn't automatically ensure it. Your kids with dyslexia and learning disabilities are smart. By definition, they're smart. But equally important to intelligence are the underlying learning or processing skills that support efficient learning. So students who have weaknesses in one or more of those areas often have difficulty then with reading, writing, math, and they may have to work harder or longer than their peers in school. But that doesn't mean they're not smart. It means that key underlying learning skills are not supporting them well enough.
And that's again, going back to my point on the brain can change. Most people, I think the common misconception is that when you have a learning disability or learning challenges, it's permanent and you kind of have to accommodate or get special help in school, and you're going to be, on an IEP, an individualized education plan, your entire life. And we just know that that's not true. We've been doing this for 36 years. I mean, I haven't, but Jill has. And we just know that like the research now is finally catching up to what we're doing. But research in neuroplasticity, what I was talking about before, is telling us the brain can change. These skills can be retrained. And that's what we do day in and day out. And so when I was answering a parent's question, I was talking about the assessment. That is essential to what we do. We don't test kids just to test them and just to get a label. That's not part of our assessment process, but we are really looking at those underlying skills, the green, the blue, the purple, especially because they're hidden skills and not everybody is looking at them when a child struggles. And so we really try to take a look to see exactly what skills are not supporting the child or the individual well. And that's where we do our work. That's where we go to work. We work to train those underlying skills. So the thing is that this work is amazing and it's so exciting because you get to see all these different outcomes where individuals who were told that they kind of just had to live with it, the rest of their lives, just don't. And they go on to be independent learners. I'm getting graduation announcements, from kids that we had 9, 8, 7 years ago. And it's amazing. And I love to see that. So it's exciting work.
It really is. And it's kind of amazing because it is such a common belief, in spite of the brain research, that if you have a learning challenge, you just have to learn to get around it. And I'm telling you, as a parent, having someone just dismiss your child's learning or attention struggles as something they're going to have to live with and just have accommodations for the rest of their life is infuriating. It's like, I know my child is smart. There has to be more to this picture. I want you to imagine for a minute that you are a child going out to play soccer and you are actually really talented. So you go out to play soccer with your team, but you have a stone in your shoe. So your coach takes you aside, gives you special lessons for running with a stone in your shoe, and then puts you back in the game. Well, even though you have all kinds of potential and you've had special lessons for running with a stone in your shoe, it's still going to be harder for you than the rest of the kids on the team. So, wouldn't it make more sense to take the stone out of the shoe? There is absolutely more that can be done for struggling students than just accommodations. We don't want kids to have to run around with a stone in their shoe. Let's strengthen the underlying skills that are at the root of the problem and get that stone out of their shoe so they can be confident and independent as they should be. So let's check back in, Lauren, with Maddie and see if there are further questions that we want to talk about before we talk about dealing with sensitive kids and 4th of July.
For sure. Yeah, so we have an interesting question here. So I'm not sure if it's Rathy, I'm sorry, but she says that her adolescent child is ADHD, not on any medication, but he definitely is getting frustrated with the current situation and being inside. And is there any counseling or treatment that we would provide to handle this sort of anger or frustration?
So we don't, that's not our area of expertise, is like mental health counseling. But if there is something that he's frustrated with, especially like the outcome of his schoolwork, that he is not able to learn as independently, that now all the teachers are asking him to, turn in assignments by a certain deadline, and he doesn't have those underlying skills to support that. And that's what we've seen. I mean, there's millions of kids in this boat right now that going remote has required of them pretty high level, sophisticated underlying skills, especially at that executive function level, at that purple level, that they don't have. And think about that, if you're constantly being asked to do something that you can't do, that is going to cause a lot of anger. And so I have seen with our students, and with parents kind of calling us and asking for help, when students don't have those skills and they're being stressed because now they're being required to be so much more independent at home, the result is anger. And also coupled with the fact that teenagers do need to be social. They're social creatures. This is when they're developing a lot of their social behavior and learning. And now they're so isolated. So now we took away some of the coping mechanisms that he may have had. But I would definitely kind of look, and I would want some more information about his executive function skills. And if they're being stressed, and I've seen a lot of different learning plans right now in different systems with schools and school districts. We have some kids that they log in every morning at 8 a.m., do kind of a live class with their teacher for 30 minutes, and then get all their assignments and have to turn them in by 3 p.m. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's one thing. Well, that takes a lot of independent. That means I have to be conscious of my time. I have to pace myself. I have a deadline now I need to adhere to. So that takes some independence. We have some students where there is no live class. It is just assignments. And so there's no human interaction. They used to have a classroom and debate and discussion, and a lot of our kids thrived there, especially our social kids, and they're not getting that anymore. So I'd want to look at, really what is being required of our kids, and do they have those strong underlying skills to support them? And my guess is not. That in most of these cases, when there is a lot of anger, it's because the child is not feeling confident in what they're doing. So despite their intelligence, so that is very frustrating.
Yes.
let me give you some additional thoughts about that. with our kids, this is a whole new, as Lauren said, this is a whole new situation for them, and having to sit for long periods of time or manage all this independent time if they have attention challenges is just going to be extremely frustrating and difficult, and they're not going to feel like they can win. So one way that you can empower your kids, and you can do this really with any problem that's coming up, is to sit down together and in a nice objective time, sit down together and acknowledge the problem. Hey, this is a crazy situation. It's really stressful for everybody, and I can see that it's really frustrating for you. What are the things, and then dialogue. What's the real problem going on here? Is it that your child can't sit in front of the computer with lessons for that long without getting antsy? Is it that now the teacher's given all this work and they have to figure out how to plan it out and get it done? Do they feel like it's just boring because they don't have the interaction with other people? Just kind of figure out what is the real issue that's going on, and then dialogue together some solutions. And I'll just throw out some possible solutions, some things that you can do to help. One is know that all of us need breaks, and especially our kids with attention challenges, they need to get up and move. So look at times during the day and kind of look at how long your child can really focus before they start to kind of feel like they want to jump out of their skin, and say, okay, how long do we think we can go? You can go 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Okay, then let's set the timer. And when that mark comes along, you're going to get to take a 5-minute break, not to play video games or anything like that, but to do something physical. So do some push-ups, shoot some baskets, chase the dog around, get up and get a drink, just 5 minutes, and then come back to it. The other thing is, if they have a lot of independent work that they have to do, that's really overwhelming, and they don't even know where to start sometimes. So maybe as soon as they've gotten their assignments, then you sit down together and again, problem solve it. Don't tell them everything they need to do, but dialogue it together. How many things do we have today? How long do you think they will take? You might say, if I had things to do, when I have things to do, here's how I think about it. Would that work for you? So really making it a dialogue, planning it out, writing it down, maybe on a big whiteboard or something, so that they have a plan to follow. It just adds a little more structure for them. And they've been involved in the process. So those are some things, that you can do. And as we go into school coming up in the fall, it's almost certainly going to have a different structure than we're used to. And it probably will involve some remote learning. So, you can take that with you. And I will tell you, our guest next week is going to be talking about a very similar thing. She's a marriage and family therapist and talking about some structure around problem solving with your kids. So be sure and check that out.
Nice. That sounds really interesting. Well, we've got one more question. A parent expresses that the teacher says that their child doesn't pay attention in class, but they have a feeling that it's not ADHD. So what are some other possibilities that it could be? What do you think?
So, this is tricky because it could be a lot of things. I keep referencing this Continuum. If you do not have a copy of this, so if if this is your first time kind of learning about the Continuum, we talk it all the time. So it's a thing. It's a living, breathing thing to us, the Continuum. You can download it at stowellcenter.com/continuum, and you can have your very own copy. And there's even an additional part that really further explains the skills that are involved at each rung. But that is why, again, I keep talking about this assessment. Again, not to label, but to really identify and pinpoint what exactly is going on when we see a symptom. So attention can be the root of the problem when we have a diagnosed condition like ADHD. That absolutely could be primary, that attention is a weak underlying skill. But in most cases that we see, I will say, in my years doing this work, attention is more of a symptom, that attention is stressed because one or more of these underlying skills is not supporting the individual well, and therefore it looks like an attention problem. So we have a lot of parents that come to us and say, doctor says it's ADHD, but I just don't think so. And so that's why we have to take a look. It could be an issue at that core learning level, the green level. So there could be reflexes. I kind of mentioned that when I talked about Evan's story. Underlying primitive reflexes that babies are supposed to have in utero. So like right now, all those baby kicks are reflexes. And in the birthing process, they're supposed to be there, but they are supposed to integrate as the brain matures. And if they don't, research has shown us that they can cause interference to learning because it's a reflex. It's not something that the higher brain controls. And so if a kid, and we just did an assessment yesterday where this was exactly the case. This child had so many retained reflexes and it was coming out in behavior and attention, that she just couldn't control her body. She couldn't sit to do a lot of the testing. So she stood and she was constantly in motion. She felt really uncomfortable anytime she had to use her body in a controlled way. Well, that's because her body is constantly misfiring, or these reflexes are firing when they're not supposed to. Okay, so it could be something at that core learning level. We can see it in processing skills, definitely at that blue level. Visual processing, and we talked a little bit about disorientation. If that's the way that the page looks every time you go to read, you're not going to want to pay attention to it. Right. Trust me, you're not going to want to get visual information. If it looks like the words are moving, it's going to feel uncomfortable, and you're probably not going to look at the page. So when I hear parents say, he won't even look at the word, he's just guessing. That's a red flag. Here we go. There might be something going on at the visual processing level, that the child is not getting good input, or it's very confusing. And yes, it looks like an attention problem because they're avoiding the task. Auditory processing is a big one, and not a lot of people look for it. But we've tested a number of kids where, again, the symptom is attention, but it's actually their auditory system, which is not their hearing, but the way that their brain interprets information coming in through their ears. They're actually not getting good input. And so, if you are trying to listen to something and the audio isn't very clear, a bad cell phone connection, or maybe somebody that is speaking with a very heavy accent, and you have to try really hard to listen, you can only do that for so long. And so our kids that are sitting in a classroom for 6 hours a day, if they're not getting good input, eventually they're going to check out. So that's where you get the yawning and the disengagement, kind of see signs like that. And executive function, I mean, there can be a number of issues happening at that level, just not thinking ahead, being very impulsive with behavior, not thinking about consequences, not learning from consequences. That could all be occurring at the executive function level. That might also look like an attention problem. So again, we could have, we can have 5 different kids, and parent says it's attention, it's attention, it's attention, it's attention, it's attention. And it could be 5 different reasons why attention is stress. So that is why we do want to look at every child individually and really assess those underlying skills.
Yes, I would definitely say that the vast majority of parents tell us that their child has an attention problem. Either they've seen it or the teacher has seen it, but only a very small minority of those students actually have attention as the root of the problem. Because if any of those underlying skills are weak, it stresses your attention system. And so it comes out as a symptom. So
Absolutely. I have like 5 kids in my head that I'm just picturing as you were talking about this stuff for sure. But we've got another question from Sharon. So she talks about pragmatics, weaknesses, and like black and white thinking, and kind of the relationship between that and processing speed. Any ideas how those could affect each other?
So, and this happens with underlying learning skills. It's not to say that like one skill necessarily is a root cause or affecting another skill. I mean, they definitely are heavily dependent upon each other. The reason why we have the skills organized in the continuum is because there are some skills that are more foundational. They're kind of centered lower level in the brain that impact higher level skills. With this kind of specific issue with nonverbal reasoning, kind of pragmatics, it has to do with social language, like understanding the totality of what someone says socially in language, and inflexibility, black and white thinking, as opposed to abstract thinking. Those are pretty high level skills. I would put them on the continuum at the upper top of processing skills into executive function. Whereas processing speed is a lower level processing skill. And so it wouldn't necessarily, because there's a disruption further up on the continuum, maybe affect a lower level skill. It might be the opposite. What happens when you have comprehension challenges, which is kind of what is involved here, is that information in kids or individuals is not organized efficiently. The information goes in and it kind of gets distorted, or it doesn't get put kind of in a logical place. And so when the individual goes to retrieve it, they don't have the flexibility of the abstract thinking that would be necessary kind of in reasoning or in comprehension. And so that could affect kind of a slow response time. Like if something's not solid for you and somebody goes to ask you a question, you might there might be a delay. And so it's not necessarily that processing speed is impacted, it's that it's because this is not a solid skill comprehension wise, the way information is organized, there might be a delay when you go to ask the child questions or recall information because it's not organized well to be able to instantly recall. And so again, processing speed or that delay, when you see it specifically with language, might be a symptom more so than the root primary cause or something that's being impacted. What we really want to look at if we're looking for a true processing speed deficit, we want to look at processing speed both with language and with no language. So processing just visual information. Do you see the same kind of delay happening with visual information that involves no language or with verbal information? And if there's a discrepancy, then we can say that, hey, it's only this delay is happening when language is involved. So that was a very nerdy response, but that's kind of how we look at everything is we have to be that, we have to fine tune that much because it's not as simple as saying, oh, that leads to that. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, definitely. As a testing nerd, I was very interested. Well, thank you for everyone who participated. We love hearing from you and saying hi and answering all your questions. If we didn't get to your question, Lauren does actually have a great resource for you.
Absolutely. So we love doing these Q&As, but we do realize that sometimes there's a lot to be said. And sometimes a lot of parents that actually watch our broadcast, I don't even know where we are now, like 20 something thousand probably have watched our broadcast. A lot of you watch after, so you're not watching live. You don't get to participate in the Q&A. We have a resource for you. It is a private Facebook group, and it is a group of parents. We call it Mom Squad. It's a Facebook group that you request to join. We do have some entry questions just to make sure you're not going to get in and try to sell some sunglasses. But Mom Squad is just a place for parents of kids who struggle to get together, to support each other, to ask and answer questions of other parents who've kind of been through that in different stages of life. I'm in that group, Jill's in that group. So if you have a question after the show, go ahead and join the group. It's on our Facebook page. SLC Mom Squad. You can request to join. And if you have a question that wasn't answered today, or kind of one of the points we made led you to think about, another question you may have, go ahead and ask it in Mom Squad. So that's a good resource for our parents. So you're welcome to join. And dads too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. Wow, you covered a lot of information today. And now, as promised, I have some special tips for surviving the 4th of July fireworks with your sensitive child. 4th of July celebrations and fireworks are probably going to look a little different this year, but if your neighborhood is anything like mine, there have been a lot of fireworks already. Think about yourself being startled by a loud noise. Your brain immediately goes on high alert, right? Because survival mode kicks in until you can determine, what was it? Where was it? Am I safe? We get startled or frightened by things that are unexpected and that we don't understand. Children with auditory sensitivity or auditory processing challenges may not be able to quickly identify what they're hearing, where it is, if it's safe. And so that kicks them into fight or flight, which means running, hiding, screaming, meltdowns maybe. So here are 5 things that you can do to help your child get through and maybe even enjoy the fireworks. So number 1, prepare. Take away that startle factor by preparing your child over and over throughout the day, or maybe even throughout the rest of this week, about the really cool thing that they're going to get to see when it gets dark on 4th of July. Number 2, build understanding. Explain to your child about how fireworks work. Talk about how the fireworks gets shot into the sky from a special machine, and once it gets really, really high in the sky, it explodes into sparkles and light. The really loud noise that they're going to hear is the explosion. So then look at YouTube videos to hear the sound and see what it looks like. Number 3, practice. Pretend to be shooting off a firework. Show the trajectory, make your hand go really high. Make the explosion sound and use your hands and fingers to be the light exploding and sparkling. And then have your child mimic that demonstration for you and for others. If you have a dog that's frightened by fireworks, have your child share with the dog how fireworks work and tell the dog it doesn't have to be afraid. The more your child practices and dialogues about fireworks, the more she patterns in a new, calmer response to them. Number 4, settle. If your 4th of July is going to be a busy day, maybe not as busy as it usually is, but it still might be a kind of stimulating day. So take 20 to 30 minutes before dark to sit with your child in a calm, quiet space. Really take some time to chill and settle, maybe read a book or hum or talk or sit quietly. And maybe let your child sit on your lap with your arms wrapped around him, or give him some nice grounding pressure with a weighted blanket, or stroke his arms and back and legs firmly. Be sure to prepare your child in advance that you're going to take this settling time together so it's not a surprise. It's always hard to pull our kids away from playtime to do something like this. So just prepare them in advance that you're just going to settle a little before the fireworks. And number 5, wear headphones. Put earmuffs or over-the-ear headphones, preferably noise canceling, on your child for the duration of the fireworks.
And I actually have a personal connection to this with my niece, who her name's Haley, and she's just a fabulous kid. She's 11 now. straight A student, no problems in school ever. But she does have an extreme fear of fireworks. And here in Southern California, we live about 15 minutes away from Disneyland. Disneyland, when it's open, it's closed right now, but when it's open, it's a big part of SoCal culture here. And so families in Southern California get annual passes. And so she's had an annual pass since she was 3 or 4. And Disneyland has nightly fireworks shows. So if you're in the surrounding vicinity, 20-mile radius from Disneyland, you know that that you're going to hear fireworks at it's about 9:40 at night when they happen. And so that's just kind of SoCal culture. But Haley, when she, starting very early, probably 4 or 5, started to get real anxiety at Disneyland. And so right when it would get to be around dusk, she would start asking to go home. And her parents kind of were like, you know, what? Like, what's going on? She would start asking what time are the fireworks before she could even tell time. She knew that that's what happens at night. And so it just became kind of this thing that her family got used to, kind of like when I talked about Evan, the family kind of adapts because that's what happens when your kids struggle. So she would get really anxious around fireworks, wouldn't want to be around them. They would always leave Disneyland before it got dark so that she wasn't there for the fireworks show. She had difficulty going to, like, we took her to a county fair. She didn't want to be near any of the carnival games that had the popping balloons. So again, she would avoid and ultimately wanted to go home early. And so this was something that her parents were just kind of like, oh, well, that's just her. She's sensitive. But because she is my niece, unfortunately, she, and I know this work, she helped me when I was training an evaluator at our center a couple of years ago. And I said, let's look at her auditory skills. Because we were just practicing and she was kind of a guinea pig. And when we tested her, lo and behold, she had extreme difficulty with one of the auditory tests. Her auditory system was not supporting her. And it was causing kind of this fear, this phobia she was having with loud sounds. And so, I mean, even when you have a pretty together kid, there can be underlying skills that are affecting behavior. And that's just, you know, my personal connection to it, that, you know, even when everything else is together, and a weak underlying skill causes challenges in behavior. So now she has her noise canceling headphones and she takes them with her in case anytime we go to an event or something like that, she'll have them in her backpack. And it helps for her to kind of reduce her anxiety, knowing that that's an option for her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it has been great dialoguing with you today, Lauren.
Yeah.
I know we are both so passionate about what we do. And so thank you, everyone, for indulging us, letting us share with you about that today.
Mm-hmm.
This is LD Expert Live, your place for real answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We have a great show for you next Tuesday. Stephanie Bean, co-author of Bully Prevention Tips for Teens, will be joining us to talk about 3 really important topics: preventing bullying, managing the good and bad of technology, and how parents can build their child's self-esteem. You do not want to miss that. At Stowell Learning Centers, we help children and adults strengthen their underlying processing or learning skills and close up the gaps in their reading or academic skills so that they can be the successful learners you want them to be. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings, so you can access our services wherever you are in the world. We are also open for on-site students in all of our centers with all the COVID precautions. If you would like to speak with someone about your child, give us a call at 877-774-0444 or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Hey, a huge thank you to Lauren and Maddie and all of you who joined us today. There are so many parents out there just like you who are looking for answers for their kids. So thank you for sharing our broadcast. And have a happy 4th of July.